Yeah, start recording
Okay.
now in case we lose it. Okay, so
Yeah. Mine's going.
this is oh crap, the dates. That's not the date. It's way later. November 21st. Okay, so this is just going through one of the um, button open sims, um, and if you were here for the first one, it's not quite as extensive. There's just less spots, and I didn't find anything as unusual. I'll be honest, but it should still be helpful here. Yeah, you guys can all see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. So let's get started. So some of the learning outcomes uh, would just be to understand the equilibrium ranges and be able to respond to basically every situation that you get taken into. And there's not too many unconventional lines that are thrown in the sim here. And I guess the other one would be just to be able to recognize mistakes that your opponent might make, or common mistakes that players makes, and I guess to avoid them yourself. So this is the button open range. I'll be flicking back into the bunker intermittently, but so this is the button open range. It's pretty wide. It's about 45% of hands, and yeah, the main size uses are well, all the sizes are used. Most of the sizes used are between 2.25 and 2.75 big blinds, and you can experiment going a little bit bigger and a little bit smaller too at lower frequencies. And yeah, like the majority of it is centered around 2.5 open. There's going to be like more open sizes and open sizes of limp at like the true equilibrium, but like the main, but it's not really important. You can basically open your entire range to anything between 2.25 and 2 3/4 big blinds, and you'll be more than fine. And then, yeah, most people are opening too wide or too big. The button open, like I've heard people say, like, oh, you should open like 60 or 70% of hands, and that's definitely not the case. Something like this is more appropriate because the blind should be three betting us often. And then, yeah, it turns out that like the weaker suited hands are preferable to, I guess, stronger offsuit hands like ace deuce off and king eight off are never really queen eight off and jack eight off, and very rarely say king eight off and ace three off are used, but stuff like 7-4 suited and 5-3 suited you can open all the time, basically. Yeah. So yeah, just stop me if there's any questions, and I can also intersperse uh, some experience or something like that into it. So how the small blind responds to the button open depends a lot on the size used. So as the button open gets smaller, the small blind will call more because he has quite a bit better odds. And then the 3-bet range used is pretty consistent. It's pretty linear, and it's way larger than most people would use. So the hands that are sort of being flatted, you need to make sure you're covering all the ranks, basically. Uh, so a lot of players would just flat like some pocket pairs to try and set mine and maybe some suited connectors, but then they're lacking in the ranks that are more important. So you need to make sure you're flatting some say medium ace x suited, so like ace 7 to ace 9 suited, some ace 10 suited as well. Like these are hands that you need to make sure if you're going to be playing a flatting range, you need to make sure you have those as well. And then honestly, versus a larger open, say 3 big blinds or higher, I would eliminate the flatting range and just play 3-bet or fold. But against smaller openings, yeah, it's probably good to have some flats. Let me just check. I think it's around 2 to 6. It goes from 2 to 6% um, depending on the open. Yeah, so 3% to 6%. Yeah, so it increases when the small blind open is small, when the button opens smaller. But yeah, you need to make sure that you're uh, using all the like covering all the ranks, and you also need to have like all the double suited Broadway hands and stuff in order to cover the ranks. You can't just flat small pocket pairs. You'll be pretty exploitable post flop, and it's pretty obvious. And in general, sub mining is just not that great of a way to play. So just be careful. if you're going to be implementing a small blind flattening range. And then when you 3-bet, you should 3-bet way bigger than most people do. So it does change a little bit depending on the open size. So when he opens to 2 big blinds, it should be something like 11 big blinds as your standard 3-bet, which is 5.5x. And then if he goes something like 2.5 or 3, you can start 3-betting to like 12.5 or 13 big blinds. Like you can basically always 3-bet to 12 big blinds, and like you should even start to go bigger as he opens bigger. Like if he opens to 3, you can probably open to, you probably 3-bet to 13, 13.5 or so most of the time. So that's the small blind play. It's pretty, I would say it's basically the strongest hands that are 3-betting. And yeah. I think some of the things that people do too much is they like to play their suited connectors in pocket pairs too much, like the small pocket pairs, and also the, I guess, weaker, like the smaller suited connectors, like 5-4, 6-5, 7-6, 8-7 suited, and even 9-8 suited you don't really need to do, so just be a bit careful there. Yeah, any questions so far? Or?
The most used size is 150%. It's like 9.5 for 2x open.
Sorry?
The most used size is 150% of the pot raise, which is like 9.5 for 2x open.
Yeah, so it depends on like I'll just go straight to the sim. It depends on how big they open, right? So if they open to 2 big blinds, then you're going to be 3-betting bigger, like 175 or 200. So 200 will be like 200 will be beat to 12 big blinds. So, and this is 11 big blinds, so 11.5 or so when he goes to 2. And then when he goes to say 3, you're gonna 3-bet bigger a little bit. 150 is the most common size used, and that's 13.5. This is the sim I'm working off of. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, and then and for the most common size, say 2.5. Yeah, the most common size is it's like pretty much between like 150 and 175, but 150, and then this is 11.5 big blinds, and this is 12 and a bit, right? So yeah, it's 13. So like 12 and a bit or so as your standard 3-bet size would probably be fine. Would be pretty good against this size. So yeah, it goes up a little bit as the button open gets bigger, but the percent is higher for the smaller opens. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so moving on to the big blind. The big blind range, or continue range, depends a lot on the open size. Yeah, it depends a lot on the open size. This is wrong. So the 3-bet percent does depend on the... Crap, I borrowed this from the old one. No, I didn't. Yeah, so the big blind continue range depends a lot on whether or not it's to, say, 3 big blinds or 2 big blinds. When it's 2 big blinds, you can continue very wide, like over 60% of the time. And when he opens to this size, you're basically continuing just as much as he's opening. Yeah, you're 3-betting like 13, 14% of the time, and very polar. Yeah, very, very polar compared to what most people do. So like most people are 3-betting quite a bit smaller than we will, but even say a 2.5 big blind open, you can 3-bet to 13 or 13.5 with a really, really polar range. So you need to make sure you're throwing in like the bluffs that most people don't. So King 6 suited, King 7 suited are pretty common ones versus the larger opens, and then also 10-6 suited, 10-7 suited, Jack 8 suited, a lot of like suited 10x basically, like suited 10x and Jack X and stuff. So like Jack 7, Jack 8, suited, 10-6 suited, 10-7 suited, even some 9-7 suited. You basically need to make sure you're mixing in some of these 10-8 suited, you need to make sure you're mixing some of these in. And then for offsuit hands, king 10 and king 9 off are basically the ones that get used. There's a little bit of ace 5 off too, but yeah, make sure you're mixing in some bluffs like that into your 3-bets. And yeah, the 3-bet size is really large. It's like 13 big blinds, 14 big blinds even for larger opens. So make sure you're 3-betting really polar there. And then like the common mistakes is like to continue too wide. Like a lot of people like to continue these weak offsuit hands because they think they've got good implied odds, but you're going to basically be crushed post-flop to very small c-bets if you do that. And then they're not 3-betting enough and it's too linear. Like they automatically see their like strong value hands and know to 3-bet them, but they don't know to 3-bet all the bluffs that you need to, like Jack 8 suited and King 7 suited and King 6 suited and stuff like that. So yeah. I don't know if I have too much to say that that's like, this is sort of similar to the cutoff open preflop stuff. You need to be going more polar than most people do. Yeah, any questions about that or not really? All right, I'll take it as none. Yeah, I'll take it as none. But yeah, you really want to make sure you're going quite a bit more polar, like the same thing as the cutoff one. So yeah, so this is what happens when the button opens and the small blind calls. So you're going to see this quite a bit in like most players are going to be flatting their small blind too much. And so how does the big blind respond? They continue way less than perhaps versus just the normal button open, and that's because they're getting worse odds, not better, because you have to beat 2 other players. And then the 3-bet frequency here actually really does depend on the size of the open. So when the open size is smaller, you're going to be 3-betting them more, like 16.5% of the time, whereas versus a 3 big blind open, you're going to be 3-betting about 13% of the time. So it's 3.5% more on 13, which is like 25% more of that. So you 3-bet quite a bit more. And my explanation for it is pretty simple. The small blind flatting range is way weaker when he opens smaller. So there's just more EV to be made because the small blind's going to be folding a lot more. So there's your reason. The small blind's range is weaker, so you can attack it more easy, or you can attack his range wider. So there's that. So people are normally going to continue the big blind here too much, but you only want to be flatting hands that sort of maintain their multi-way EV. So stuff that's, you know, some ace-x suited type hands and some pocket pairs which can flop like really strong hands is what you want to be continuing. And when the open size gets really small, like you can even, because you have to call one big blind, like a lot of like king X suited and queen X suited hands that you can have like some good flush EV with, you can start to go there. When you're squeezing in this spot, so unlike when you were in the button, the big blind versus the button, you're going to be squeezing quite a bit smaller, like 9 or 10 big blinds is enough, and that's because the small blind is never going to call, or is not going to call very often, and you can just pick up his money for free. So you don't want to go as polar. Something like 10 big blinds is probably a good standard size to go. If he opens like to 3 big blinds, a little bit larger, it's fine, like maybe 11. But yeah, it's around pot. Yeah, pot or 125% or something like that is what you want to be doing. And then make sure you're not continuing any like offsuit stuff despite the pot odds, because you're going to get crushed post flop. And then most players aren't 3-betting enough, nearly enough in these sorts of spots, because yeah, I'm not sure why they don't. 3-betting will make you a lot of money here because the small blind will continue very rarely, especially after the button folds. So make sure you are 3-betting quite a bit when it's like anytime that there's like a few callers, you should be trying to squeeze pretty often. Yeah, as for the range used, yeah, as expected, all the strong hands that are trying to get some money in, and then a lot of like double Broadway suited hands, ace-5 suited, and as well as some like the normal polar bluffs like 9-7 suited and 9-6 suited and king-9 suited and stuff like that. All right. Yeah, feel free to stop anytime if you want to ask something. Okay, so how does the button respond versus a small blind 3-bet? So this is like some of the examples that I just took out. So we're 3-betting way larger than most people would. But even like basically no matter what, the button's gonna like to flat a lot and play post flop in position, especially when they 3-bet quite small. So like if we open to 2.5 and they 3-bet to 10, which is probably a common size you might see online when people aren't 3-betting large enough out of position, then yeah. Yeah, you want to make sure you're flatting a lot playing in position with some really strong hands like ace queen suited, king queen suited, even tens. Like you're flatting pretty wide, and then you're flatting pretty wide, so your 4-bet range is really polar, even though you're going to go to a small size. So you're going to make it like against a large 3-bet, you're going to go close to min. You're going to go a little bit bigger than that when they 3-bet small, like to 20, 21 or 22 big blinds or something like that. But like your 4-bets are like ace-6 suited and ace-10 off, and I think it's king-9 suited, king-8 suited, queen-9 suited, and like a few of the junkier ace-x suited hands. So yeah, even though you're going to a small size, you can do that. And then when the size gets really big, you can start to even jam. Basically, the hands that are jamming are like always queen-jack suited, tens, jacks, and ace-king. A little bit of ace-5 suited too, but you can develop a jamming range of these hands here. Queen-jack suited, ace-king off, tens, jacks, and ace-5 suited. When the 3-bets get say over 13 or 13.5 big blinds, that's when it'll happen. And then if they're going to like 15, it happens like all the time. Those hands are like almost always jamming. Yeah, and then the mistakes here is like the hands that fold versus a small blind 3-bet is like obviously all the junk, but like people like to continue like king jack off and queen jack off and stuff like that. And also like the weak suited stuff you can also fold. Like when the suited stuff has too much like they're not like without too much playability in terms of set and straight like straight possibilities, they often fold too. So a lot of the king x suited and queen x suited and jack x suited will fold. Like the weakest stuff of your opening range needs to fold, and that includes like all the offsuit broadways and ace x off and a lot of the suited crap stuff. So make sure you're folding those. Because it's very tempting to want to continue them. So, and then yeah, 4-betting polar enough is important. Like you need to maintain some strong hands in your flat range because you're going to flat pretty wide. Yeah, that's about that. If there's anyone wants to ask something now. All right, so when the big blind 3-bets. Yeah, we already sort of went over that we're going to be 3-betting really large to, yeah, like 13.5 or something like that. And even though most players won't, like maybe something like 10 or 11 is more common to what you might see, so we'll go over that one too. Yeah, so when the big blind 3-bet's really polar, the only really 4-bet size you're using is basically min. There's a little bit of jamming, but you can get away with just min clicking your entire 4-bet range, and your 4-bet range is going to be, yeah, really polar despite being really small. So like 2.5, 13.5, you're basically going to the min size you can, which is like 24 big blinds. Yeah, 24, 24.5, depends on the configuration. You're just going really small. You're just clicking it. And you're doing that with a really polar range yourself because you're going to flat a lot, again, wanting to play in position. as much as you can. Post flop, taking advantage of your position. So that's that. And then the 4-bets are basically you can easily categorize them to like jacks, queens, kings, aces, ace, king. Like that's your value portion, a little bit of tens, and then your bluffs are like over here. It's like king 8 suited, queen 9 suited, ace 6 suited, ace 3 suited, this type of stuff. So you're very polar in your 4-bet range, even though you go to a small size. And he's gonna get punished if he like flats too much because your value is just gonna own him. When he goes to a smaller 3-bet, then you're flatting basically as much as you can, with the same sort of thing where you go where you have like your value, which is like jacks plus ace king, and you also have some bluffs like ace 10 off and ace 6 suited, ace 2 suited, queen 8 suited and stuff. Like you've got a little bit more bluffs here because you're going to go bigger. Like you're going to go to 24 big blinds or 24 and a half big blinds still, as opposed to just min clicking them. But you're going to have you're going to be pretty polar. Sure, and then I think the main thing is people don't 4-bet polarized enough. Like, for some reason, people just like to 3-bet the value, or 4-bet rather the value portion of their range, but you need to make sure you're doing the bluff portion, and you'll gain quite a bit when you do it too. So, it's definitely worth doing. It'll be much harder to play against, I think. So, yeah. Any questions there? Either the.
I have a question.
Sure.
It seems like it's flattening more with aces once the size gets bigger.
Yeah.
But even though it's falling less, it just seems a bit counterintuitive to me. I guess it's since the raise is higher, it doesn't lose as much by not 4-betting or something like that.
Yeah. So when he 3-bets to a really big size, like it's probably easiest to see in the sim. This is the button versus big blind, right? So like let's say you open to 3. And he goes big, like aces will flat like all the time. Like as it gets really big, aces are going to start to flat all the time, and that's because like what's 250? It's like 19 and a half big blinds. Yeah, so here like even here, right? So aces are going to flat all the time, and that's because you just make more because the pot's already big enough. Like the SPR is going to be like 2.5 or something like that. Like aces will just get it in all the time, right? So even if he goes something like this, like it really does depend. Like if he goes too small, like you need to put more money in because trapping him won't be as good because like he can suck out more easily and stuff like that. And just like aces just would rather to have like, a lot more money in the pot to start with. You can still like basically stack off like almost all boards with aces. But yeah, if he goes too small, you need to make sure you're putting more money in with aces. But as it gets big, you can see aces starts to flat. That's pretty common. Like aces likes to flat a lot because it doesn't need any protection. The typical reasons like that. When they go really big, like you can just let them punt off into you, and your EV will be higher than that, or will be higher because you don't fold out their bluffs and stuff. But like a hand like kings or ace king or jacks or something will want to put money in quite a bit. Like make sure the money goes in pre-flop. Because they're not going to have as easy a time navigating post-flop. Like aces post-flop will be pretty easy. Like even like if this happens, no, even kings doesn't start to flat. So yeah, now king starts to flat sometimes in like weird configurations. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, make sure you're flatting aces as like after it gets to like 14 big blinds or 15 big blinds. Because the SPR is going to be less than 2.5 there, and aces can just safely stack off and let him bet into you. Does that answer it at all?
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed with these like late position spots, I can't remember if it also happens blind versus blind. I guess we'll get there, but seems like sevens and fives specifically make it into the 4-bet range pretty consistently.
Yeah, I think
I
this
don't
is ace-6 suited.
Insight.
Sorry? 7s and 5s?
Do you have any insight into why that would be?
Why 7s and 5s but like not 6s, for example?
Yeah, and like, I mean, pocket pairs in general seem a bit counterintuitive to me to be putting in the 4-bet bluff range.
Let me see if I can answer it like this. Yeah, so in the 4-bet bluff range, you mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be a little bit.
Sevens is different versus a jam, and 5s folds, which both are like not great outcomes for those hands.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking with the 5s,
it depends on the size.
5 suited gets 5-bet jam quite a bit, right?
Sorry?
I was thinking with the 5s, like ace-5 suited gets 5-bet jam quite a bit, so maybe 5s does well to block like that jam specifically.
Yeah, I mean that you see it there when you 4-bet. Sorry, when you 3-bet. Right? And then the 4-bet happens. The 4-bet, like the bigger 4-bet happens, and 6s will jam because it doesn't block 5s or 7s, which will probably fold. Yeah, so like jam, and then 7s is indifferent, 5s is like a little bit losing, and then that's because some ace-5 suited effects. I think you blocked the bluff there. Yeah, you blocked the bluff there. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Maybe it unblocks his bluffing range quite a bit too, because if the bluffs are all like offsuit, like
really.
Jack-9 off type stuff.
So, if you say, let's do a big blind example, right? So, there. So, yeah. So here, for example, like you're not going to 4-bet 6s, but you will 7s and 5s, and that's because of ace-6 suited, and that's because you're gonna want to call ace-5 suited, because it's like actually a decently strong hand as a bluff catcher, and then so ace like 5s doesn't like if you're calling ace-5 or ace if you're 4-betting ace-6, then like you need less like on the 6x range, so you want to like be sort of even across the rank so that you have more, I guess, slightly better board coverage. I wouldn't focus on this too much.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting about the ranks.
Yeah. It's also like he knows that you're doing it more with 6x, and therefore if you have 6x and then you know he's less likely to have it, so you're gonna fold more, like that type of thing. If you just only did like if you just did them equally 5, 6, 7s, and like you knew he was 4-betting ace-6 suited, then yeah, you could change the frequency which if you call it, right? So like in here, then like your 6x hands will like probably fold. Sorry, your 6x hands will yeah, probably fold because they know you don't have ace-6. They know like ace-6 suited is less likely, which is one of your bluffs. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Yeah. The next is getting into 4-bet, so like this would be a good spot if anyone has any 3-bet questions, basically. Yeah, so like just a small review, I guess. The 4-bet size is really small but really polar. The 3-bets are way larger than what people normally do, and then call like more sparingly than people normally do, and really it does and really tailor the calls to the size. So like the small blind calls a lot less when it's a bigger open, and so does the big blind. So when the button opens bigger, just make sure you know you're not flatting as much. Yeah, and this will apply like especially to live. Like when the opens get huge, like you should never flat. Like after like 3.5 or so, the small blind should like never flat like 1.5% of the time, and then yeah 17% of the time when he's continuing. Yeah, like half of the time you're gonna be three betting when you continue. When he opens really big and like like after like 4.5, like you should basically be playing three bet or fold. Like there's gonna be some hands that want to get to flat, like the pocket pairs and stuff, and then so you're gonna need to protect. You're gonna need to have like board coverage with some like king jack suited, queen jack suited, ace 10 suited and stuff. Like there's gonna be that effect when they open that big, like super polar, because you're gonna want to flat, but like then you should just play three bet or fold almost. After like 4.5, 5 big blinds open, so like if you're playing 1-2 and they're opening to 10, you should just play three bet or fold from the blinds, and it's gonna be fine. Like you should definitely do that. Yeah. Any questions there? All right. Yeah. So four betting. Yeah. So this is like how the small blind or the big blind will play against a button four bet. So we already saw that the blinds are three betting really really large, and so on the top is what you should see the button do most of the time. Like you should see them go. You should see them go very like a small four bet, but you might see them go a little bit bigger. And like let's just look at a little bit of the differences. Maybe the first thing I'll point out is that these ace-x hands, like these ace-x suited hands, they don't actually occur that often. So let me be clear. Over here is the small blind three bet, and over here is the big blind three bet. So you shouldn't for example, the big blind isn't going to be three betting ace two suited and ace three suited that much. So, yeah, just because you see it all red doesn't mean it's getting jammed that often. And then, yeah, same thing over here. And then when they, yeah. Anyways, basically every time there's a four bet by the button, the blinds are going to just jam the same hands every time. They're going to jam like tens through kings, not aces, sometimes, and then ace king basically. And then when they go very large, you can bluff jam king queen suited and queen jack suited. Same here, by the way, ace suited. Yeah, so you can bluff jam queen jack suited and ace and king queen suited quite a bit as they four bet you larger. So like a lot of people don't like to four bet to like the very very small size. So if they four bet to the very big size, then you can jam these. And the reason you do that is you block the queens, kings, jacks calls, and you just gain more when you win the pot. So over here, like king queen suited is going to be a pure call because you're not going to win as much and you don't have to call that much more. Here, for example, you'd have to call 16.5 more, so like you don't really want to call as much, and then you'd win more as a jam, like a few more big blinds, which is really where all that EV is. So, yeah, that's that. And then, yeah, the aces flats happen quite a bit versus four bets, and that's just to protect all your other flats. And when you protect all your other flats, EV of aces will go up because you won't have aces that often. So, yeah, make sure the stack off range is generally when the button opens is tens plus ace king, unless the small blind flats or unless there's a cold three bet rather, a cold four bet rather, where the ranges get a little bit tighter. So it's a bit tighter than that, but yeah. You can do some bluff jams with king queen suited and queen jack suited. Yeah. Any questions there? Like this is like quite a few sims packed into here, and I didn't really comment on it too much. All right, and then this is like the last slide I have of content rather. So this is when how the big blind plays when there's a small blind like button opens and the small blind three bets. And yeah, it's going to depend a bit on the size. So when we see like smaller three bets from the small blind, like smaller than you should, you're no longer just basically min clicking them. Like when you see really when you see like really large small blind three bets, you're basically min clicking them that'll be around 21 or 22 big blinds, depends on the exact sizes, like 10 and a half more, so that's 24, but like basically going like as small as you can, because most of your range is going to be cold four betting. There's like this weird like ace queen suited, ace jack suited, and like some like 9s and 10s and stuff that flats. You can try that if you really want. I don't know. Be careful if you do. Like make sure you really know what you're doing post flop in these spots, because having a super narrow range is generally tough to play. Like on a lot of boards, you're gonna have some problems. Yeah, and then as the 3-bet gets larger and larger, you can start to developing like a cold 4-bet jam range, like we saw in the cutoff open, of 10s, jacks, ace king, and king queen suited. Yeah, as the 3-bet gets larger and larger, like you can, like if it's like 13 and a half, obviously you're doing it like about half the time maybe that you can, but like as the 3-bet gets like really large, like 15, you should do it like all the time you can, because there's just more dead money to pick up. Yeah, so those are some jamming hands. If the 3-bet size is too small though, like on the left here, like 2 to 8.5, then the yellow size here is to like 21 big blinds, as opposed to just the min click. Something like 21 big blinds, like very close to 21 big blinds, as the cold 4-bet works pretty well in like every configuration, or every size, like button, open, small blind 3-bet. 21 big blinds, and then if it's a really large 3-bet, you can start to toss in some jams. And the reason you can do that is because your min sizes, like more merged, and then so your jam size can be more polar, like ace king 10 jacks is the value, and then king queen suited is a bluff. Yeah, and then the other thing that I'll just comment on, and I'll go to the sim like directly in the sim to show, but when there's a cold 4-bet, all the remaining positions will stack off a little bit tighter. So instead of stacking off like 10s plus ace king, you start to not stack off 10s, and you're just a little bit more cautious. So I'll just show that quickly. So 2.5, let's say, I think that's 13. Mins, and then so the 10s is folding for the button, for example, and that's because he's afraid of both the small blind and the big blind range, which could be very strong. But yeah, that's a small difference you might want to notice, like as opposed to normal, because you're facing two ranges that are uncapped, so they could both contain hands that are stronger. So you're a bit more cautious with 10s and stuff, so you're not jamming that, just like really the top there, and then like let's say he jams, then the small blind, he has a lot committed already. Oops, never mind, that's not what I meant to do. Yeah, here, and like let's say he jams, then the small blind's not gonna stack off 10s and jacks, right? Or ace king off for that matter. Because again, the big blind behind and the button are uncapped, so the small blind's gonna be more cautious with the jams. And I think, yeah, that's the main deviation you'll ever find from the stacking off like 10s plus ace king when the button opens. Like just a reminder, like when the cutoff opens, it's like jacks plus ace king you can get in. When the button opens, it's like 10s plus ace king you can get in. Like sometimes some other hands, because they're bluffing a little bit more, like ace 5 suited, king queen suited. Sometimes those hands get in, like ace queen suited sometimes gets in. But yeah, 10s and jacks, like yeah, they might start to fold when there's the cold 4-bet. And that's probably pretty important to note, because it's actually like significantly different, because yeah, it's significantly different because of the cold 4-bet. Just to compare it here, so like this is small blind versus button, right? So it's just queens and ace king suited. But for example, if it was something like this, and yeah, he jammed, then oops, not he jammed, fold, jam. Yeah, in this case, like you're stacking off really wide. Like even 9s makes it in, but like 10s is like super wanting to stack off. Same with ace king off, like super wanting to stack off, but because of the cold 4-bet, things get tighter. Yeah. Any questions there? Yeah, so I don't have too much more to say. And then yeah, just in summary, you're going to want to 3-bet more often and larger from the blinds than almost everyone I see do. You want to 4-bet smaller, like close to min. Yeah, take it like when the button opens, you're almost always going to be in position when you're 4-betting. Yeah, unless it's like small blind flat. Yeah, you're always like you're basically always in position, and you can go smaller, even though you're more polar because you're going to be playing in position and you want a little bit more stack depth. And then the other thing is like when you're in position, you should opt to call a lot more and play post flop in position. So yeah, I'll go back and take any questions. I know this is like quite a bit shorter than it was last time. Anybody?
What's the strategy?
Sorry?
5-betting.
What's the what?
Strategy 5-betting.
You're a bit choppy. I can't hear you. The 5-betting strat?
Yeah, to your side.
I really can't hear you. Hello?
Hey.
Yeah.
What's the strategy involving 5-betting to your size that's not Owen? It seems like aces or sometimes 5-bet very small.
Yeah, so this sometimes happens, like the non-all-in 5-bets. Those happen more frequently when it's like earlier position opens and the 3-bets are smaller. Yeah, so it happens more frequently like in the small 3-bets, small 4-bets. So like there's gonna be like more to gain by having some like mins that go on, like some like min 5-bets that go on. Like I can probably show them with some smaller stuff here. Yeah, so like let's say you open to 2, the button opens at 2 rather, and then the 3-bet is to like 9.5, like a smaller 3-bet, and then a small 4-bet, like a small cold 4-bet, like he's supposed to do often, right? Then, for example, the button will have some like clicks, like aces, ace, king, like a lot of them will start to click, basically. Or like a configuration like this. Yeah, so instead of all in, like a lot of hands can click. So like aces is one you need to put. If you're going to be clicking, you need to make sure you're doing it with aces, as opposed to flatting here. So like because he went so small, because the 3-bet was the open was small, so the 3-bet was so small, then this is a normal 4-bet from the button. But if the small blind wants to do these like mins, like these min clicks, then he needs to like. The advantage of doing it is to be able to bluff hands that don't want to jam, like ace-8 suited. Like you're gonna be spewing if you jammed. Yeah, you're just spewing like 1 and a bit big blinds more if you jammed. But yeah, if you can toss in a min, like a click with it, like you can get some folds, and that's because it's protected by aces. But yeah, you got to be really careful when you're doing it. It's like literally centered around aces, and then when you min, like he's gonna flat a bunch, and all those hands are gonna lose to aces, but beat the bluffs basically. The min clicking like 5-bet stuff happens much more when it's like the sizes are smaller. So like let's say it's 3, 9, like this is small blind versus button, small blind versus big blind rather. Like here, when the sizes get smaller, you start to get into clicking wars. You can't really yeah. All that happens when the 3-bets and 4-bets are smaller, not when they're this big. Like because we're going to be 3-betting. You don't need to worry about it when you're the small blind or the big blind because you're going to be 3-betting so big that it's not going to happen. So like if you like 2.5, let's say the big blind you go here, right, and they click you, like, yeah, I guess you could say, like, for some reason it does it a little bit with this hand, which is ace-9 off, but, like, it never really happens, right? Like, and your real guy's not going to click you. He's going to do this, and it never happens here, right? So, or like, let's say you went this size, and yeah, he goes this size. You never click. The clicks only happen when there's enough stack left so that it's like not as ridiculous, if it makes any sense. That's not a great way of putting it, but like this 60% here is already, oops, this 60% is already 27 big blinds. So the click is to the click is to 41 big blinds, which is like already putting in so much of your stack that you're kind of forced to call off. Like if he jams, right, then like you're forced to call off. Like some hands you don't really want to call off, like Queen Jack suited and stuff. Like you don't really want to call it off. So you got to be careful. And like even like all these hands are really doing it at such a small frequency that you don't need to put in your game. Like King Jack off like at 5%, Ace Queen suited like at 10%, King Jack suited at like 5%, nines at like 10%, Ace 5 suited at 10%. Yeah, I wouldn't worry in these configurations about the clicks because you're out of position that you don't really need to play these kinds of pots. Like if you're going to be 5-betting out of position, which is not spot to do it, maybe the only one I can check is like the cold 4-bet. Yeah, the button doesn't even do it here. It's just going to jam because it has 2 players to fold out, which like it'll make so much more dead money from folding them out with a jam. Because if you click here, like if he decides to click, then they're going to jam on him, and like all his hand, like 2 players could jam on him. Like the small blind or the big blind could jam on him, and he'd just lose with the like small amount that he like he's gonna be putting the money in anyways. He may as well try and fold out the equity of other players. So yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, so can you elaborate more on the summary slide? Like, I just want to have an overall guidelines to follow. Like, what is the kind of play which is being played, and how should we adjust more to be a more profitable player?
I don't have a great answer to that, other than to maybe expand a little bit more. But what I mean by these points, so 3-bet more often and larger from the blinds. What I basically mean by that is like, as we saw, like compared to what I think most players do in these sort of spots, I think most players are just 3-betting like the fairly normal range, but versus the button open, you can go quite a bit wider, right? Like you can, like, you can go quite a bit wider because the button range is wider. So like Ace Jack suited is like a value 3-bet, right? King Queen suited is a value 3-bet. Ace Queen off is a value 3-bet. And then you also need, and you're also going way larger than what I think most players do. And when you're going way larger, you should also use some more like a large, like a much more polar range, right? So like maybe I'll explain the big blind, like why the big blind is so polar. The big blind is really polar because they have a really good price to call. So a lot of hands, will want to call because they've got such a good price, and so you need to protect that with some like a little bit stronger stuff. And so when you're going to be 3-betting, you're gonna go way larger. Like there's gonna be some hands that just are much more happy to get more money in, like, as opposed to protecting some range. And so you're gonna go really large with your value hands, and you're gonna have to choose some bluffs too, because the bluffs will start to make money because you'll fold him out. So I think most players are not polar enough. Yeah.
Yeah, for example, here the bluff was King 6 with 3 times, right?
Yeah, King 6. Yeah, those are some bluffs. Yeah.
So how is the sort of like taking specific examples?
I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Sorry, what was that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can. There you go.
Yeah, so how does one understand all the logic picking up all these combos of like king 7, king 6 in this particular spot?
Yeah, so I'll just go back to the sim for a sec. So like 2.5, right? And like let's say that, so like let's say you're here. Like how do you pick up that you're using, like, so the value is like pretty easy, right? It's just 9s plus, ace queen, plus,
Fine.
yeah. Okay, the bluffs. So there's a few things to do with the bluffs. One is to cover all the ranks, right? So like you need to be able to cover like every rank. Like you don't really want it to be the case that a board comes out like with like 2 10s on it and you don't have enough, right? Like, so when you bluff, you should have some equity, right? So it's normally suited hands. And the reason that there's like it's a little bit more sparsely popular with kings here, with king X suited here, is because of this. If you go to if you open to a larger size, then these then like you have more king 6, king 7. Like the intuition behind it is to be very polar, right? So you have value hands, you're going really big. So that means you also need to start bluffing a lot more. Otherwise, he's going to fold, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then why use 10-6 suited? You may as well take, like, if you're going to be very polar, like you need to take stuff from the bottom of your range. And you take stuff from the bottom of your range, and you have to cover every rank. And you also sort of want equity. Like 10-6 suited is obviously a pretty bad hand, right? And like all these hands at the bottom of your range, like 9-6 suited, 10-6 suited, 9-7 suited, like the bottom, but also able to cover, like across them. Like you don't need, okay, in general, you don't need to cover the very low ranks because the very high ranks will come.
Okay, so almost like in the middle of your like range, you pick those hands, not the absolute bottom.
Like the reason you don't need to cover.
For example,
yeah.
Yeah, for example, not king deuce king 3, not deuces please, not like 3 4 suited, but like 4 5 6 7 6 maybe.
Wait, what?
For example, I should not take up like 3 4 4 5 and maybe pick up like 7 8 8 9, right?
Yeah, so the reason you want these hands, you want so you're gonna mix in the bluffs, right? And like the reason is you want to be able to cover every rank. Like every single rank of card that might come, you want to be able to cover it with a bluff. So like bluffs need to be able to sometimes become like strong. So these king X hands will become strong on like when they hit flushes, for example, or when they hit a king. Like if you hit a king, like these hands like king 6 and king 7 will be pretty strong. When you hit an ace 5 suited will be pretty strong. When like jack 8 suited, this hand is to cover like all the 8x ranks and the jack x ranks, right? So like you're not going to cover a whole lot. Like you're going to have jacks, right? Where's jacks? Jacks is here. You're going to have some jack. Like how are you going to cover the jack rank when jacks come off? You're going to have jack 10 off, jack 10 suited, jack 8 suited, enough of the time, right? And then king jack off and ace jack off. Okay, and then what's like? I mean, that's like those are still sort of towards the top of the range, but like. How are you going to cover the 10x rank? Because you don't have a lot of 10x ones for value. You don't have really ace 10. It's not going to be 3-betting that often for value. You don't have ace 10 off. It's not going to be 3-betting for value. You have 10s, right? But, you know, it's already double blocking. So you have some jack 10 suited, some 10-7 suited, some 10-6 suited. Are you, for example, 3-betting any 6s for value? Not ace 6 suited, not 6s. Those are not value. So how do you cover the rank? You want to have some 10-6 suited, some 9-6 suited, some 8-6 suited, some 7-6 suited. Yeah, and they can often like make straights and stuff too, like rarely, but so a lot of these are gonna
that's fine.
Like a lot of them, like a lot of these hands, like post flop, like let's say you 3-bet and he calls, like you say you use this size and he calls, then like post flop, oh actually maybe no point in doing that. Nope, like post flop, a lot of these hands here, like a lot of these hands. You're either going to give up with them or you're going to bluff with them. Because they're either going to flop some equity or they won't, right? Like if the board comes, I don't know, like some random board, like... Yeah, so like all these sort of hands here, like all these bluffs, are either going to pick up equity or they won't. And if they pick up no equity, you're going to give them up. Because like that's how you play a polar range, right? Or if they have equity, you're going to, like, they're going to combine with your value and like they're going to be, you're going to be betting polar, basically. Like when you do this sort of strategy, the flop you need to know how to play post flop properly, and I'm actually going to make a quiz on that later, where you want to go like you're not going to be doing like these small like quarter pot range bets, right? You're going to be You will do a little bit, but like you're going to be going because your range is
sure.
going to be stronger. But like you're going to be like 3/4 the pot and like 3/4 the river and then jamming on the turn and then jamming the river, right? Like that's a line where you're going to check raise and like this is how you're going to be playing post flop when you have this type of range.
Okay.
Yeah, because you need to protect your like if you check, because like in order to stop him from just betting small and like canceling all your equity with these garbage hands, you're going to raise them. So yeah, there's different post flop things will have to change there too. But I found quite a lot of success when I switched to this 3-betting polar strategy.
Okay.
Yeah. Like it's also like much nicer, right? So like if you
Yeah,
open,
definitely.
it's much nicer if you have king 7 suited and he folds pre. Like that's much nicer than having to play it post flop.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
In terms of 4-betting smaller, like the 4-bet smaller is because you're in position. Like every single time when the button opens and a 4-bet happens, the 4-better's in position, right? So if you're cold 4-betting from the big blind, you're in position versus the small blind because the button's like never gonna just flat. And then if you're the button, you're always in position, right? So you can 4-bet smaller even though you're more polar. That's because you still want to have some playability post flop. Whereas most players are like, I want to go like 2.5x, like you want to make sure he folds a little bit, but like your aces and kings are going to be protecting your like your bluffs like ace 6 suited and stuff. So you don't need to go so big in order to get folds.
Okay.
Yeah. You just get cheaper bluffs through too. So yeah. And then yeah, play post flop in position. Basically, we were seeing that the button is flatting a lot versus 3-bets. Other than hands that really want to put money in, like kings, queens, jacks, like those hands because they're more vulnerable, but so strong, then they can put more money in pre-flop. But like even aces will start to flat versus large 3-bets. That we saw like here aces will start to flat. Here it's like almost always flatting. Aces starts to flat. Aces almost always flatting. Like aces like starts to flat even versus like large 3-bets. Like large 3-bet here, like aces will start to flat. And that's just showing that you want to be playing in position post flop as the button. Like you can continue super wide because you're in position. Not super wide. You can continue wide because you're in position, and so you can leverage your position a little bit better.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, like this is why, like I said, the general things, like the general takeaways is like 3-bet more often and more polar and larger. 4-bet smaller, even though you're sometimes polar, or you're often polar, like the button is polar. 4-betting and like play in, like call and play in position post flop. Like those are the summaries, but you can always like go back and rewatch this video. It'll be uploaded.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Anyone else have something they want to maybe comment a little bit on?
Yeah, I'm curious, like the solver uses a lot of different sizes. How would you go about implementing that in practice? Can we simplify to just using one size? Or I guess like the min stuff and min 4-betting stuff, that makes a lot of sense to me, but like opening to sometimes to 2.5x and sometimes 3x, I don't know, yeah.
So you need to cover them because your opponents will do certain things, right? But like the majority of the time you're opening, it's either to 2.5, 2.25, or 2 3/4. If you could get away with opening to 2.5 all the time. You could do it. If you want, you can mix it up a little bit. It's tough to like. I haven't really found any like hands that like strictly prefer certain sizes. I haven't found it. Like looking at this, it looks like all of them are basically centered around like most of them open between 2.25, either 2.25, 2.5, or 2 3/4, like almost all the time. Like they all, I think like every hand is gonna mostly prefer 2.5, other than like for some reason ace 8 off in terms of its frequency. But yeah, if you want, you can open just a 2.5 from the button. It's very viable to do that. And then in terms of 3-bets, like there's like clear sizes preferred, right? So like it's literally either 150 or 175%. So like this is 11.5, right? And then this is 13. So like you could like always go to 12. Like if you always went to 12, you'd be fine. 2.5, 12 is like fine, or 2.5, like 12.5, that's fine. You can mix it up a bit if you want, but like again, like, is there any hand here that's like, there's like certain hands that prefer a little bit smaller, like ace king suited, and like some of the suited stuff prefers to go a little bit smaller, and then some of the offsuit stuff goes a little bit bigger. But basically every hand is like happy with either size, and like you can just merge them if you wanted to. Like this is around the size we're looking at. We're looking between like 11.5 and 13, as opposed to 2.5, 10. Like there's gonna be a big difference if you go to 10, right? You're just losing too much value. Same thing like from the big blind rather. Like which sizes are used? It's like mainly 200%. Like almost all the time is 200%. Let me see if I can get an exact number. Yeah, so from the big blind, let me just use my calculator quickly. 100 minus 55.4. Yeah, so you minus 13.8. So yeah, you continue. You threw at 13.8% of the time when he opens a 2.5, and like most of that is to 200% or 175%. So like 200% is 13.5 big blinds, I think. Yeah, and then 175 is 12.125. Like you could just always do 13 big blinds. Like 2.5, 13 can be your size from the big blind, for example. Like that's not going to crush you too hard. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Any more?
It's not really anything to the Sims, but I thought it was interesting that you said that you're using a different sizing when your ranges get more polarized. So you don't do a lot of small betting when you have a polarized range?
Yeah, you don't. Not very much.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, like the idea is like, if you're polar, you're not gonna. So like, normally polar like I think getting into the exact theory here is not as like it's better to go back to the toy games to understand why. But like when you're more polar, you usually use a large size with like strong value and bluffs, right? And then when you're merged, you use a small size, right? So if you're polar preflop, you're like almost never going to flop a merged range. So you may as well use a large size.
Yeah, I just thought that since it's a free bet pot, the pot is already quite big, you'd still do some small betting. I don't know, but it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the board and depends on the sim. Like where it'll either like it'll definitely check raise or bet large way more than most people would. I mean, in general, people are doing the small bets, like maybe sometimes too much, but yeah. Anything else? All right. Well, that was that. Thank you for everyone for coming. We'll have the video uploaded soon so that we can see it. And other than that, I'll stop the stream and then we can do some questions after. So if you're watching later, thanks for watching. And thanks for everyone for participating. So.